Can we develop the skill of remembering the future? Can we develop this skill? I know it's a logical impossibility, of course. And yet, the spiritual traditions are rich with invitations to stretch our imaginations and open our hearts by turning common beliefs about what is possible upside down. You might know of the Sufi character Nasruddin, famous for riding on a donkey facing backwards, who teaches through stories where he appears both wise and foolish at the same time. Or the example of Jesus, of course, who you probably know set out to prepare a meal with barely enough bread and fish to serve this congregation for an after-service snack, and yet somehow filled the bellies of how many? 4,000 or 5,000, exactly. In fact, you might say that like many of the world's spiritual traditions, this church exists in large part for inviting us to hold the impossible as a dream among us, then to use that dream to shape our actual behaviors in the here and now, and by so doing, changing the course of history. Yesterday, in connection with the many activities designed to prepare your search for this congregation's next minister, some 36 or so of us spent a few hours taking part in a workshop called B4, Break Barriers, Build Beliefs. The workshop's purpose was to help expose biases. The bad news is we all have them. And then, in the language of today's reading, to shake the scales from our individual and collective imaginations around who could be best suited to become your next minister. We did this because experience has shown that despite all the work we UUs have tried to do around needed culture change, there's still a kind of invisible model many of us hold in our imaginations about what set of qualities constitutes a minister, or indeed who can or should be a leader in our movement. No surprise, the most commonly held set of personal identifiers includes some, if not all, of the following: well-dressed, highly educated, cisgender, that is, people whose inner sense of their gender identity lines up with the gender they were assigned at birth, without disabilities, apparent or not, straight-sized as opposed to plus-sized, neurotypical, assertive, competent, sometimes male, and white. Not only does this model shape who we identify as being made of leader material, it also exerts a steady pull on how those of us who are leaders inhabit our leadership responsibilities. As a mixed-race person raised by a mother whose own value set was seeded primarily by parents who were born in 1890s Japan, she's here, by the way, once I entered the path to ministry, it didn't take long before I had to extinguish many of my inherited behaviors to suit the expectations of my UU community. Use the word I more, people said to me in response to my early sermons, though to me they felt exceptionally personal. Be more funny. We can't tell what you're thinking or what you believe. Now, if you're at all familiar with Japanese culture, you'll know that generally speaking, it's considered rude and even childish to name what you think or want full on. Instead, it's your job as a listener to pay close attention to verbal and nonverbal cues in order to sense my position and then hopefully organize around them. What I quickly learned from UU culture, however, was that if I presented myself in the way that came most naturally, not only would my message not be heard, but I wouldn't be seen as a leader. And so I learned to extinguish aspects of how I'd been raised to suit the dominant UU conventions. Doing this opened up pathways to professional success, of course, and I can't help but feel that somewhere along the line, something was lost in translation. In the spring of last year, a group of 16 UU leaders published a book of personal reflections about the challenges our movement faces as we try to dismantle barriers to full inclusion and honor our UU 8th principle. Instead of creating a how-to book delivered in a single voice, the authors presented a series of personal reflections. They called the book Seeds of a New Way, in the hope that each of their stories be received as a seed planted in the garden of possibility. Although the contributors were all American, the experiences they name are largely true in our Canadian UU spaces as well. The book lifts up three main themes I believe you would do well to keep in mind as you prepare to exercise the solemn responsibility of choosing a new minister and by so doing, becoming a shaping force for the future of this congregation and for generations of UUs to come. First, a minister who departs from what one of the voices called the privileged UU norm will likely bring in not only new and important perspectives, but skills and life lessons that come from other communities. At one level, a choice like this is likely to make your congregation more resilient. At the same time, the further this minister lives from the privileged UU norm, the more stress they're likely to experience in their partnership with you, precisely because your system, not by any intention on your part, will exert pressures on this minister to either assimilate or leave. And so abundant curiosity and care on your part will help your minister and your relationship with this minister thrive. The third message I heard in the book was this: the further your new minister lives from that privileged UU norm, the more they're likely to usher in change, if you let them. But what usually happens is that though we say we want change, over time, we also find change deeply uncomfortable, and we want things to change back. As people who have recently moved to a new home, I think you'll know what I mean. Yes, change can be so exciting. And you may find yourselves newly in tension with each other because you just can't be together in the ways that you're used to. And so a tension exists between the opening to growth and change on the one hand and protecting the places we experience as home. We know our world is changing in ways that mean we will need to rethink everything. What's been all too true in our movement, however, is that when leaders from diverse backgrounds try to initiate change, this typically becomes uncomfortable, and then we are told that we are the problem, not that change is hard, or that, to use the words of our writer from earlier, the Reverend Julian Jamaica Soto, all of us need all of us to make it. So one last story told in The Eye. A few centuries ago, I was beginning my first career as a social worker at a sexual assault center. We were a team of professional women who mostly embodied the list of qualities I named earlier: well-dressed, highly educated, cisgender, neurotypical, competent, and white. with me as the lone mixed-race person who hadn't yet unpacked this identity. Whenever we were hiring a new staff person, there was one thing we had agreed was non-negotiable. Team members, we said, had to support choice around abortion rights. In fact, it was unimaginable for us that someone could support victims and survivors well if they didn't believe in choice. Here's the thing, though. Each time we interviewed a candidate of color, they told us it was difficult for them to fully affirm choice, often because of their religious beliefs. This meant that in the end, we only ever hired white women. Most of the people who used our service were white as well, and we didn't think much more about it. What I understand now that I didn't then is that we could have and should have considered candidates with more varied points of view. Yes, it would have changed us. It would have been exceptionally hard. And in the end, the many gifts from these people of diverse perspectives would have helped make us, in unimaginable ways, a more dynamic organization, truly structured to respond to the needs of the diverse community of our city. And so perhaps the question is not so much who will you choose as your minister, but how will you choose to be together? How will you live into your shared commitment toward the day toward which we gather, the tomorrow toward which we advance? Choosing your new minister will be just the beginning. It's how things unfold after that that will make all the difference.
Thank you, Adam. Walt Whitman wrote, "Do I contradict myself? Very well, then I contradict myself. I am large. I contain multitudes." No doubt we can all, at least in part, relate. Yesterday at the workshop, we were asked to think of two personal stories. One we would be happy to share, if known, and another that we'd be uncomfortable sharing, particularly if the person we were sharing with might think it was an accurate representation of who we at our core were. I do contradict myself. I know we all contradict ourselves. We each have stories we are proud of and others we would rather not share. That is true of our Unitarian and Universalist stories too. There are many spiritual ancestors who we feel justifiably proud of, but they, like we, are a study in contradiction. Here's just two. Edwin Everett Hale was an American social reformer. Hale advocated for religious tolerance, the abolition of slavery, and wider education. And Hale supported Irish immigration, not because he hoped that North America could offer hope and health for those escaping the Irish potato famine, but because he felt that the new workers could take on menial jobs that involved hard labor. that Americans would no longer need to do. Theodore Parker is another example. Parker was an outspoken abolitionist. He famously wrote his sermons with a loaded gun at his desk as a means of self-defense in case he was needing to protect himself and fugitive slaves which he was harboring. And Parker firmly believed that the Caucasian race, especially his Anglo-Saxon branch, was inherently superior to all others. And actually, one final one. Julia Ward Howe, she had strong anti-slavery sentiments, was a leader in the women's suffrage movement, and yet she too has a complicated legacy. In her travelogue, A Trip to Cuba, she used dehumanizing language, comparing Latin Americans to creatures and flies. Wow. The list could go on. Many of our faith ancestors held opinions that were resoundingly the products of their dominant understanding of the culture, and yet they were also at the same time ahead of their time. They did, and we do, contain multitudes. We are contradictions. We can all aspire to live lives in which all of our personal stories and all of the secrets of our heart match our shared values. It's a good thing to aspire to, and we won't always manage it. We won't because those pesky dominant cultural understandings have shaped us and informed us in ways we struggle to even see. Yesterday, P.K. Curtis, who led the workshop, referred to unconscious bias as ideas that were given to us without our permission. That makes it trickier. We don't even know we hold them. So how is it we're supposed to shed ideas and prejudices that we aren't even aware that we carry? It's a good question, and it's important if we are to grow and learn. And I know that this congregation is committed to growing and learning. It is at this moment in this congregation's history essential work. Our search committee is doing their best to think about the type of minister that will help take this congregation, newly arrived in this diverse neighborhood, into the future you have dared to imagine. The work of this moment, I think, is to pay attention to our bodies, our reactions, our responses, even as we stay open and curious. I suspect it's always an important part of the work of being human, but in this moment, as you learn, as we learn to be neighbors in this new place, as you anticipate the arrival of a new minister, it is critical. As Nicolene has noted, you want a minister who can begin their work with you largely unencumbered by unstated expectations. The responses to the questions you were asked by the search committee indicate that you value a minister's ability to lead worship. But what if they come with an accent that's a bit strange to your ear? You want a minister who can foster community. What if that means you have to be okay with being uncomfortable some of the time? What if some of the results of the survey don't match your hopes and needs? What if this process means your needs aren't centered in the way that maybe you are used to having them centered? Unitarian Universalists are proud of their history of religious liberalism, of their ability to shake off oppressive theological doctrines. However, at times we have valued the individual at the expense of community. Of course, individual rights and freedoms are important, but so too is the health of the community. We, each of us who find our way here, need to ask good questions. What's important to me and what is important to us, followed by a look at what beliefs and biases we individually and collectively hold that might stand in the well-being of our community. The next minister, the one you will choose to help you move into the future, probably won't check all of your personal boxes. They may not be the answer to your secret longings, perhaps even the ones you don't realize you have. How do we do the work? We were given some ideas yesterday. I've said them earlier here just now. Remain curious. Pay attention to our reactions. Sometimes our bodies tense up when things seem out of sync for us. Question ideas, particularly your own. Tell stories, and it doesn't matter if they are fiction, that stand in opposition to common viewpoints, and then challenge the biases that we do notice. There are more. And the goal of all of this is to retrain our brains to avoid the too well-traveled road. In 1845, when this congregation was founded, things did not look like they do today. Those earliest members likely wouldn't have imagined today. I don't know that they would recognize you. The work of this moment is to do what we can, to build a new way and to remember with conviction and affection the future. Let's take a breath. This is important work. It is hard work, and it is work that we do together. We'll fall short, at least some of the time. Let's take another breath. The word aspire, inspire, and conspire all have at their roots the Latin word for breath. Let us breathe together again in service to the possible.